That. So about 20 years ago, I was an administrative assistant at UC, working at UC Berkeley as an admin assistant. And we had, my coworkers and I, before I came, they had formed an independent union. And we did not have a contract, and we had low wages that we couldn't afford to support ourselves on in the Bay Area, let alone families. Many of my coworkers were single moms. And a lot of us were disrespected by the faculty, by the institution as a whole. And I was not super engaged at first, but my coworker asked me if I wanted to be part of a strike action. And I think that sounds exciting. Okay, let me see what this is about. And the more I started getting involved, the more transformed I became by seeing how individually each one of us could complain, be frustrated, be hurt by the conditions that we were faced with, by the unwillingness of our immediate supervisors or the university as a whole to respond to us. But when we marched and had rallies, and we did every single week for a year, when we, the administrative assistants were supposed to be doing everything behind the scenes, nobody's supposed to notice you. When we took our megaphones and marched into the university buildings and just made a huge ruckus, when we did a hunger strike, when we held press conferences and embarrassed the university with a double standard, and organized across multiple campuses across the state, right, together. And eventually took a strike vote. And the night that we put our ballots in the mail to vote on whether to go on strike, magically the university found a whole bunch of money that they supposedly had not had, right? And it was such a feeling of empowerment, right? Of just this shift from feeling powerless to feeling powerful with my coworkers, with these women who stood shoulder to shoulder together over weeks and months and ultimately a year and a half till we got our contract. And that to me was transformative. And so this began a whole pathway for me where I wanted to learn how to share that with other people, right? And so over the past, multiple years, I've gotten the privilege to learn from, talk to, and share strategies about organizing with car wash workers, with musicians, with janitors, recycling workers, teachers, actors. We're in LA, right? And farm workers. And I brought the training, the collective wisdom of lots of organizers with the movement, right? When we do these trainings, this isn't me telling you what's worked best in organizing campaigns that I've been on. It's that too. But it's the collective knowledge, right, of organizers in industries across the country, right? These are this is not a one size fits all. This is an experience in which we learn from each other, right? Every single time we do one of these trainings, I learn from the people in the room. And if I'm not learning from the folks in the room at one of our organizing trainings, then I shouldn't be an organizer, right? Because one of the fundamental things you got to be as an organizer is curious, right? To be curious about what moves other people. What is it about their work that they just can't take anymore, right? That's impacting them, that's impacting their families, and then figure out how to get them in touch with how to use that to take action, right? To go from hopelessness or frustration or apathy or anger to hope and action, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today. I will say we do it, and Dylan and I talked about this. We do a 3-day organizing institute usually to walk through all of the steps of an organizing conversation and practice each of them, and to move folks to be ready to go out and organize their coworkers. we're getting like a snapshot today. We're going to practice a snapshot. And hopefully we'll get the chance to collaborate on a full 3-day organizing institute at some point in the future. But this is a piece. And this is specifically about how workers can organize themselves into a union with a collective bargaining contract. But this is, we in union organizing, I think, are constantly needing to learn from community organizing, right? About building relationships, about really developing leaders. And I think there are tools which union organizing can absolutely be useful for community organizing. So we're stronger when we're finding those intersections. So I'm going to start from the beginning, which is why we organize. And I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint, which I'm going to use somewhat, but not exclusively, because that's how Nathan, I'm pretty old school. So I like to write on easel pad paper. Because I want to make sure that we're taking in the collective experience of folks in the group. Hasta ahora necesito que traduzco algo o cómo va. ¿Te salió su?
Ahorita estoy bien. Amalia me está ayudando un poco.
Okay. ¿Quieres que traduzco algo o más o menos estás ahí? Okay. So first of all, let's talk about why we organize. And this means, why do we take action collectively in our workplaces? Why do we think it's important to organize into unions and to take collective action just in general? Let's hear an issue, something that somebody's actually had happen to them at work. What's something that's bothered you in the workplace? I'm gonna pick on you a little bit, Ben, because you mentioned that you organized for Starbucks, right?
Yes.
So what was going on at Starbucks that made you guys want to organize?
Let's say working.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So there were some different issues where there was no store safety plan. We were being asked to use chemicals without protection or without any sort of guidance, and it was basically all the employees to follow the MSDS for chemicals. But then when we would ask for the PPE to properly use the chemicals, we weren't getting that. So it's very frustrating to watch a lot of these baristas who are teenagers or in their early 20s using these toxic chemicals on their hands and breathing spume and not having a proper training. And so it's frustrating to watch these young people go through this. Like, you don't have to do that. You can refuse that work. They didn't understand that. So I was trying to motivate, hey, like, this is just a job for you right now, but like 10 years down the road, you're going to have breathing problems and not know where to go. So trying to advocate for a more safe environment, make sure that the management was on top of things in this moment, rather than putting our lives at risk for dollars and saving time and money.
So safety. And this is one, I think, salud y seguridad en el trabajo, right? This is a big issue for a lot of people. And I think we've seen a big shift in this country in the past few years in terms of people's attitudes about work and attitudes about organizing because of the pandemic, right? We saw that our employers were willing to literally risk our lives, right? And not even share the huge increase in profits they were getting, right? And when we do a longer section, we'll do a whole thing on capitalism and race and gender. But I think the bottom line here is a lot of people had a wake up call, right? About the realities of it. So we'll take safety. A couple other issues, yeah.
So CEO management, making a huge drastic change that affects the workers' vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of workers lost that have been there for, a couple of years. They lost 8 weeks of vacation time. They had plans, like a worker shared, she was planning for pregnancy, right? And so she was saving up for a year, all her vacation weeks, and she lost it. And so she tried to fight it, but management didn't.
This is something that you feel you've already earned, right? This was already promised to you, you've already planned and taken away. Other reasons why people organize, yes.
I'll be honest, to get paid what we're worth. Not getting paid what we're worth. I'm a CNA. I work for the state. That's a whole different story. But there has been a bill that has been passed that healthcare workers who have worked through the pandemic and healthcare workers respectively are to be paid $25 an hour starting in July. Place I work for, no, we're not gonna do it. So that kind of, with my background, I'm like, I need to come back and visit Dylan and come back and see because, I'm not having it this around. I mean, I admit I have a great job to an extent, but when we have these, like, employee appreciations and you see these iPads and you see all this, I'm looking at all my coworkers like, are you serious? You're gonna flip for a toy when we need to have higher wages, we need to do better with our healthcare. You know, I'm like, I gotta go see Dylan this week and see what.
Getting paid what we're worth, right?
Honestly, I was hoping people can say breaks,
Mhm.
meal breaks, and just that 15-minute break for go back.
Yeah. So getting paid what we're worth, especially given the cost of living in California, right? And when getting a supposed cost of living increase by your employer often doesn't even make up for the increase in the cost of food, rent, etc.
And then when you look at what they're making, like if you sit down and you look at the profit of what the CEOs with the profit that company is making, you gotta look at that. I'm the one causing that. I'm making sure you're having that profit. I'm showing up to work every day. I have that smile on my face. I'm there to take care of what needs to be taken care of. You need to take care of me because that's not gonna happen if I'm not there.
That's right. Who builds the profit? Who does the work that profit comes from, right? It's nurses, it's the farm workers, Starbucks workers, right? We are who gives the company, the boss, that profit, right? So, and then breaks, right? This can seem like a small thing, it is not, right? Just went to a press conference where Amazon got cited $6 million for 2 sites alone, for having quotas for so high that workers can't even go to the bathroom, right? They do not have time to go to the bathroom to meet their quota. Okay, great.
Affordable welfare.
Yes. Not just healthcare, right? Because lots of companies love to say, "Oh, we have a great healthcare package," but it costs, half of your wages, right? So affordable healthcare. So aquí tenemos salud y seguridad, pierde de beneficios como vacaciones, que nos pagamos lo que valemos, descansos, salud, seguranza de salud, ¿no? Que nos podemos, que es alcanzable. Okay, so we got a pretty good list here, and we could go on, right? So let's talk about, these are reasons why we might want to organize to change things at work. What are the ways we could solve these that don't involve collective action and organizing a union or collective action in the workplace? What are the ways that we could solve these things that don't involve collective action?
Enforcement of already existing laws, regulations.
Yeah. Law enforcement, and by this we mean not the cops, we mean, for example, safety. What agency is responsible for enforcing health and safety laws? I know CBDIO has a lot of experience with this one. And what's one of the problems we have with this solution? What's that?
Consumer protections, good, got it.
Got it. Okay, so what does this mean? Agencies that are supposed to enforce our laws have been gutted. Does anybody know what the staffing rate is at agencies like Cal OSHA or the labor commissioner's rate? ¿Qué es el índice de gente que están contratado para la comisionada laboral o Cal OSHA? They have a vacancy rate of 30 to 45%. That means in many places, close to half of the staff that they should, right? And quiero preguntar a CBTIO, but I'm gonna pick on you guys a little bit. Ese falta de gente, falta de personal en Kalos, ¿en qué resulta? ¿Cómo es como agencia? ¿Efectivo?
No es efectivo, no puede atender a las quejas que hay porque no tiene personal. Entonces, el problema es ver qué está pasando en la agencia, cuáles son los requisitos que tienen para contratar a gente, cuánto están pagando, por qué la gente no quiere trabajar en Carrocha.
So I asked Aurelia from CBDIO an example of what does this gutting of staffing mean for enforcement? It means they can't respond to the claims that exist, right? And it means that they're not effective, right, at being able to enforce our safety laws. And let's say in a perfect scenario we have full funding for Cal OSHA and the Labor Commissioner's Office. Just as an aside, I went to a hearing, I listened to a hearing about staffing at the Labor Commissioner's Office. The budget for the Labor Commissioner's Office in California, which is responsible for overseeing employment rights, all this stuff, for all of the workers in California, is about $220 million. I live in Los Angeles. In LA County, we spend $330 million on it. Does it seem like we are staffing our enforcement agencies to be able to deal with the problem of labor law safety? Absolutely not. And even in a perfect world, let's say Cal OSHA comes out and cites the employer. What's to prevent the employer from just doing that again after they've cited, right? Maybe fear of enforcement, maybe not, but you haven't shifted the power. What's another way we can deal with any of these issues? So we can file a complaint with the government agency. Anything else we can do?
¿Puedes repetir en español lo que acaba de decir?
Sí, claro. Que aún en un mundo perfecto, vamos a suponer que tiene todos los puestos Cal OSHA, puede venir y citar la compañía, pero ¿qué previene con que la compañía repite esa violación? ¿No? Lo que falta ahí es un balance de poder entre los trabajadores y el empleador, ¿verdad? Que puede estar vigilando, porque cuando Cal OSHA se fue, ya no hay nadie que está vigilando.
También porque las multas no son fuertes.
Yes. So if Cal OSHA leaves, there's nobody who's going to be watching that company anymore. And as Aurelia points out, the citations are ineffective to deter companies from. So this is one. Let's talk about a couple other options.
The public,
What do you mean by the
making the public aware of what's going on in that company, letting it, hey, you know, our workers aren't being paid enough. Like, I work with those, I love them, I love them. They have this entitlement that goes on, and when they find out what's going on, they're the biggest factor that keeps me working. And in order for me to stay, my partners, I need to work me. What do you mean you're not getting the raise? We pay for it. So it goes to them, and then, of course, that's like my biggest asset, are so letting the public know that we're not being treated fairly, because if we're not being treated fairly, and we're not getting, our elderly people aren't being treated fairly.
Yep. So the public can be a powerful tool in helping remedy conditions, but the public opinion relies on having an enforcement mechanism to make that company do something, right? You can run a boycott, and that can be effective in persuading the company. Public opinion can help pressure enforcement agencies to do stuff. But again, if we don't have somebody inside, workers inside watching, there's no way to prevent the company from repeating the violation. What else? Has anybody ever quit a job they don't like, unhappy with? Yes, right? That's another way, quit. A lot of times when we're talking to workers about organizing, don't waste your time. I'm not gonna be here long, right? I'm leaving, I'm gonna find another job I can't take it. What's the problem with this? Yeah.
I mean, one of the obvious problems is that doesn't work for farm workers, right? Farm workers don't always have the options to just quit, and oftentimes their status is held against them. They're trying to leave or do anything related to farm. It's one big falsehood.
Yeah, absolutely. If your visa is tied to your employer, it limits your options, right, Jane?
The other option I'm thinking is they would get replaced.
Mhm.
And so, and that's what I'm hearing with the organization I'm working with. They have such a high turnover, but they also have a lot of new employees. And so,
Yes, and then that gets repeated, so other workers then have to go through what you were going through, and you go find a job somewhere else, and are conditions probably different in that other job?
Maybe.
Maybe they're different, yeah, maybe they're not, right? Maybe they're the same as the problems you're running into in North. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's quitting doesn't solve the solution that will harm others that come after you. That's just, it'll be just, yeah, the company will have bad retention rates, and it may look bad to some degree, but they will always be able to do low wages for new people coming in because they're less experienced, but they continue to make profits on those low wages, so they don't care,
Yeah.
they'll continue to treat people that way.
Okay. Sometimes workers will say, well, I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna get a better job. One of the things we like to say is, this is getting a better job, right? When you organize, you are getting a better job, right? You are committing with your coworkers to make this job better, right? And your job can be transformed by building collective power with your coworkers. So let's talk a little bit about how union organizing and organizing in general is different. So what does it mean and how is it different from these options to organize a union? What do we win when we organize?
Contract.
I'm good at contract. Contract. So we win a contract, and what does it mean to say you have a contract?
For me, it means that this, it's a Bible. To me, it's a Bible because you're gonna sit down with your other coworkers, other employees. You're gonna look at the seniority, you're gonna look at the able. It starts off as a dream, but you break it down to being able, these are what the employer is going to abide by its employees. If you breaks are there, your lunch is there, your time off is there, your childcare is there. The matching of everything that you guys agree upon is in that contract. If you're supposed to get those days off, if you do your scheduling, everything that you feel that is important that you're gonna bring to the table for that contract is gonna be in there. And that's where your negotiations are. That's where you talk to everyone that's what's important to them, your time off, your work, how much you're gonna get paid, what your seniority worth. All that is in that contract.
Absolutely. So a union contract is a written agreement between workers and the employer about what working conditions are going to look like, right? And a lot of times when you ask folks who are already in a union what the difference is, they point to the union contract because it is kind of feels like our Bible, right? But it's also a piece of paper, right? And if that piece of paper doesn't have power behind it, it's meaningless. Just like we know our laws in the state, if they are not enforced, if we don't push the government to enforce them, they're meaningless, right? So what do we have to do to get the employer to agree to sit down with us and actually put in writing what they're going to do with legal action behind it if they violate that? What are we didn't put it up here. Next one. We can go up when we have these problems. We go up and individually ask our boss, right, to improve safety, right? You've been laughing already. To give us pay us what we're worth, right? To give us our breaks, to give us affordable health care, Has anybody tried to do this individually in their workplaces?
Yeah.
How successful?
Like,
Not so much, right? So what is the difference when we're organizing a union? Yeah.
It's, we're seen as a one union, so we're one group, it's a whole, so they no longer see us as individuals, but they see us as bringing, the attention of all of our members.
That's right. We are a unified group. This is, it's a fundamental shift, right? From the employer being able to play us off one another, being able to isolate us, being able to laugh at our requests, right? We are a unified group. A lot of times it's a little bit, with organizing conversations, it sounds a little bit silly, but I've seen this be really effective. We're just thinking about giving people a concrete example of collective power. If you give me a pencil, can I break it? Sure, easily. If you give me a stack of 10 pencils, can I break it? It'll be a lot harder, right? Same thing with paper. On paper, super easy to rip. Give me a ream of paper from Staples, right? So just thinking about how we can be stronger when we're one unified group. Anything else? So we are unified as a group. We have a contract. Yep.
Representation,
And what does that mean?
usually it comes with some kind of, business agents or people who understand the law better than the individuals, so that they can come in and, better, enforce the contract for the employees.
So a lot of unions are structured so that, let's say here together, we're all working at Fresno City College. And you all are the members of the union. I'm gonna say Jane she's our shop steward, right? So that means she's the representative that you all elected or was picked to be inside the workplace and be kind of a leader, right? And she's the person you all go to if you need help. But your dues, the money that you pay into the union collectively, may pay the salary of a union staff person whose whole job is to know inside and out this contract, to know labor law in our country, to be connected to other unions, to be connected to Dylan at the Labor Council, if we all need support in a fight, right? So you may have representation. A lot of our unions, unfortunately, have leaned on too much on outside representation, right? It's the staff person's job to come in and fix problems, right? But if we're not building power and we all as a group are not willing to take action with Fresno City College stops providing air conditioning, whatever it is, right? And I can come in as a rep all I want. It's not going to say, yeah.
Use the steward is there.
Yeah. So there's kind of two pieces that are necessary, right? We have the institutional support for our union, which is necessary, and we have the organizing effort of the workers to build power, which is
And the fundamental last piece there, and I don't want to, but the work stop, right? The ability to stop the employer's, ability to make money is so crucial, and that gives, when you have the legal ability to strike, that's where the real power's at. We're finally as a movement just getting back to it.
yes. I have another one of these shirts that say strikes work. When I started doing these trainings years ago, one of the big scary things that the employers used to use to scare people out of joining a union was, oh, well, you may have to strike. And now it's still a scary thing to do, right? It's putting your job at risk. But people have seen how powerful it is. It's usually an escalation technique. It's when you've used all of your other ways, but withholding our labor as workers. We talked earlier about we are where the boss gets profit. Withholding our labor is one of our, and having legal protection to do so is one of the strongest tools we have, right? Okay, and then I talked a little bit about this. I'm going to mention it just because this is one of the things, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it because this is one of the things that union busters, right? There's a whole industry of attorneys whose entire career is built around trying to convince workers for money not to join unions, right? So familiar? Yes. right? And that's our funding. How do unions fund themselves? How do we as unions fund ourselves? Where do we get our money? Yeah. So that means, for example, if all of us again are the City College Workers Union, we're gonna all chip in part of our salaries every month or every week, whatever the setup is, so that we are self-funded democratic organizations. This is something I don't think I really understood when I joined the labor movement, how critical that is, right? There's a lot of institutions that get corporate funding. Unions do not get corporate funding, right? They are institutions that are funded by workers for workers. Go ahead.
And just as you're thinking about it, I just had a thought. So it's democratically elected. So this is democracy in action. This is actual, like, I mean, taking it to a grander scale. This is a small democracy that we're actually helping
Absolutely.
get familiar with, and then that will help. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that's another important one, right? We are self-funded and we're democratic organizations. That means if you are all, again, the City College Workers Union, and you have elected, let's say, Alejandra to be your union president, and ultimately you decide you disagree with the direction in which she's leading the union, you can vote her out of office, right? So this is worker self-funded democracy in action. And so these are some of the reasons why it's powerful when workers can work, right? These are some of the reasons why really this is one of the best, absolute best ways for workers to build power in the workplaces, change their conditions. And all of this stuff, all of these things are things that the union busting industry tries to scare people with, right? Oh, the union's gonna take your money, right? They don't talk about democracy. They don't talk about workers funding, worker action. They're gonna make you promises. No, you should never be making promises, because the only thing we can guarantee is that we are gonna be stronger when we fight together, right? And we're gonna aim to get the best thing we can in a contract. But this is, there's all kinds of fear tactics and a whole industry built around convincing workers not to join unions. And I think that's the best indicator of all of how powerful it is. Right? If unions didn't work, the boss would not mind if you formed. Right? All right, so we're going to talk now about one of the key ways that we build our unions. I'm gonna have you guys do something first. So this all sounds great, right? Thumbs up? Suena bien? Yeah. Okay, so why don't we have more unions then? What's our percentage of unionized workers in California? It's around 15%, right? And that's a combination of the private sector and the much higher public sector. You're one of the states with higher unionization rates in the country, right? I just got back from visiting our labor movement in Idaho. 4.5% of workers in Idaho. So
Academically, the teacher union, like that.
in here or
Here.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's public and private. So about 15%. Yeah. 2 point. That's a small fraction, right? That means 85% roughly of workers do not have a union. So why is this? What's that? There's less. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that now, and maybe. Yes.
Fidelina said that workers don't believe in unions.
Yes. So
Yeah.
this is. I'm going to ask you guys to actually put this up. So I want to hear from you. What are the obstacles to organizing? And exactly that. So Fidelina, si lo puedes poner aquí, que no crean en sindicatos, ¿verdad? So I want you all to take a minute, and I'm going to ask maybe Dylan and Brenda, if we could pass out some Post-its. Right on here, anything you think is an obstacle to organizing. Maybe, so anything that y'all think is an obstacle to organizing, whether it be individual opinions, for laws.
An easy one.
¿Ya lo tienen? So vamos a escribir cuáles son los obstáculos.
I actually really like this one because I know all about it.
And when you're done, come and bring it up here and post it in our obstacles to organizing. So cuando estén listos, ponte sus razones, sus obstáculos aquí. That's the first. Okay, we got it. But I think it's a very valid point, right? Because we have a lot of distrust of our unions, right? Falta de confianza. And this comes from a lot of things, right? This comes from the ethos in the United States of individualism, comes from living in our system of capitalism, and the employer misinformation campaign, right? Media misinformation campaign about unions. And in some cases, it comes from our unions ourselves, right? Where our unions have gone astray or not been true to the needs of workers. That's something that is used and perpetuated, right, in misinformation campaigns. Unions are human organizations, and that means they can sometimes take a wrong direction, right? I think we've seen, I don't know, how many people have been following what's been happening with the UAW, United Auto Workers? Yeah. So we've seen a union that went from about a decade ago, right, giving major concessions to auto companies in the U.S. No judgment, right? We'll decide judgment for right now. But basically, saying it was fine for these companies to make huge cuts into worker salaries, right? When there was a lot of money going to CEOs, right? And a lot of workers lost faith in the union, right? Because the union was not fighting for their best interests. And so what happened? The leadership of that union got voted out.
Yep.
Right? And there is now a new, more militant leadership of that union. And what have we seen? We saw that new leadership, under that new leadership and workers having faith in the new leadership of their union, took back the militant history of the UAW being willing to use that ultimate tool in force to withhold their labor from the employer and extracting huge concessions out of the industry, which could more than afford, right? You've also seen that union representing grad students, right, on campuses. And recently, even going on strike on issues of principle, right, around free speech, around the right for grad student workers to protest around Palestine, right? We've seen a shift in the radicalness and militancy of this union, and union members have new faith in their union, right? Because they changed leadership. So I think this is misinformation and mistrust is key. One of the things that we do in an organizing conversation is talk about the ways in which, because our unions are democratic, they can be changed. But we as workers have to participate in that. So let's see what else we got up here. I've got a bunch of laws here. I've got Janus. What does Janus stand for?
Janus EMC.
Yes, Janus versus ASME. This is a Supreme Court decision that was aimed at gutting our public sector unions. Our public sector unions are the backbone of the labor movement, Traditionally, it's been easier to organize for workers in the government, right? And right-wing corporate forces took the case to the Supreme Court to try and gut our unions using Janus for SASB.
Sassy?
Good question. Can brother back? Yeah. American Federation of State, County, Municipal. Yeah, there we go. So Janus was just the latest in a series of legal attacks on our unions, but the foundations of our labor law also exclude huge populations of workers in this country. What workers are excluded from the National Labor Relations Act? ¿Cuáles trabajadores están excluidos del acto que proteja el derecho de organizar un sindicato federalmente?
Migrants.
Trabajadores de campo, ag workers, right? Domestic workers, people who do cleaning, do domestic work in the house. If we take any wild guesses, why? Racism, yes. Ag workers, domestic workers, historically at the time, primarily Black, historically immigrant workers, these workers were excluded from the right to organize under federal labor law. So our laws from the beginning, even at their strongest, right, have been set up to divide and exclude certain workers. So that's another reason. What else do we have? Lack of knowledge, right? Because unionization rate is so low and our educational system is not designed to inform us on our rights about unions, but people simply don't know. Right? They don't know what a union is and what it can do. We have a new law that has a workplace readiness week in California, so students can learn about their right to organize. It's exciting. But we also have fear of retaliation a lot here. So can you tell me about that?
I got that going on right now.
What does that mean?
Let's say your evaluation's coming up. You've always had a great evaluation. Then now you're getting called into bullying people. And they're looking for ways to fire you. They're looking for ways to overcutting your hours, or they start trying to diminish you so they can find a way to fire you.
Yeah.
That's a form of retaliation.
Right. Yeah. So the fear of losing your job, getting your hours cut, of the employer being able to take negative action against you because you weren't, right? And there's a reason why it's easy to retaliate against workers who are organizing in this country. How many people know how much the fine is for a company that fires workers? Fires workers for organizing a union. $500. Do we have any other guess?
3,000 maybe.
There's no fine in the National Labor Relations Act for the act of firing workers organizing. You may have to reinstate those workers, right? And you may have to pay back pay. And our current National Labor Relations, our general counsel for the National Labor Relations Board is getting very creative at figuring out how to make companies pay for that cost to workers, right? Including lost health care, income, mortgage, etc. But fundamentally, we have to understand that we rely on our own power to an exceeding degree in the workplace because of how weak our labor laws are.
Can you repeat that part, but the part?
Yeah, que bajo el acto del acto de relaciones nacionales, que es lo que cubre el derecho de organizar federalmente en los Estados Unidos, no hay multas para compañías que despiden gente que están organizando un sindicato. Esto dicho, el ALRB es separado, ¿no? El acto que tenemos en California, por ser excluidos los campesinos del acto nacional, tenemos nuestro propio acto para campesinos y su derecho de organizar un sindicato aquí en California. Pero para todos los trabajadores en general en los Estados Unidos no hay multa. Puede ser que las compañías sí tienen que pagar, que reemplazar, regresarles a su trabajo. Ajá, y pagar es el salario que debería haber pagado por el año o lo que sea que perdieron. Y ahora, bajo el concejal, otros costos, ¿no? Pero no hay una multa en sí. Entonces, la ley que gobierna el derecho de organizar generalmente es débil, ¿no? Entonces, dependemos mucho de nuestro propio poder como trabajadores y la presión que podemos poner, inclusive de quitar nuestra labor, para enforzar nuestro derecho de organizar. ¿Ya? Okay, I am pretty far behind. I went into a lot more detail than we probably should have, but I think this is a really good conversation. So we've got a lot more obstacles up here that are absolutely right. And all of these are why we have to really have a plan when we want to organize, right? Because if not, we may fail. And we have a lot of obstacles against us. And organizing campaigns are not always successful the first time around, right? How many people heard about the organizing campaign in the South with the UAW, right? Where auto workers just won a union. Anybody know how many times they have to run that union election? That was the third time, right? It was a huge factor. Garment workers organizers that I know used to say, big factories in the South, you're not going to win it unless you run it at least 2 or 3 times, right? Because sometimes there's so many obstacles, right? But we have to have a plan. So, some of the keys to how we organize, workers have to take action, right? A lot of times, professional union organizers will go and say, all right, we're gonna organize a union. All you gotta do is sign up on this card, and then we're gonna win a contract, and then the rep's gonna come in and take care of everything. Is that gonna win? No. Is that okay? Make our boss understand that there's a shift in power in the workplace? No. We have to talk about the union as something that we've got to be part of, right? One of the things we say is like, we're absolutely never supposed to sell a union, right? The union is not a service that workers are buying. It is not insurance, right? But a lot of times when we think about it as a service, we get it completely wrong anyway. Because if you were going to compare it to anything, it would be like a gym membership, right? I can have a membership to the most expensive gym in the world. Am I going to get stronger? Am I going to go in that gym and take action? Absolutely not, right? It's a tool for us to build power together, right? We got to have a strategy and a plan. Many times we are up against multinational companies. They have all the money in the world, right? They have attorneys to scare us. So we have each other, and we have the broader movement. We have the collective wisdom of how to fight these companies. So we got to tap into it, put together a plan, and find out where the company's weaknesses are, too, right? Is it the fact that workers are harvesting strawberries, which have a very short shelf life, right? And so they can spoil easily. So if they lie fallow, it's going to cause a big problem. Is it in the auto industry, where if this factory that provides parts to the larger auto factory is shut down because of a strike, the whole supply chain goes down, right? We need to be thinking about where employers are vulnerable, because we got to use every tool at our disposal.
Because they're going to.
Because they're going to, exactly. And I think one of the most powerful tools, and this is what our longer 3-day organizing training is geared around, is we use one-on-one communications in the house, right? We can and should use all of the tools available to us. Social media, right? Putting stuff out over text, etc. But if I'm not talking to Jane, sitting down with her one-on-one and figuring out why she wants to risk and confront all these obstacles, right? Then it's not going to work, because we've got to build trust amongst each other as workers. We've got to understand that if something happens and the boss does start retaliating, I'm going to have her back and she's going to have mine, right? And I know that the reason she's in this is because she really wants to get out of the apartment she's in, and unless she's making more money, she can't do that. She wants to do it for her kids. So we remind each other, right? This is why we're facing this. Can't do that unless we're really conscious. So I'm gonna talk briefly about the steps to one-on-one organizing. How many people had a one-on-one organizing conversation, whether it's been about the union or not? Yeah, good amount of people. ¿Cuántos han tenido una conversación uno por uno para organizar una acción colectiva? ¿Sí? Okay. So what do we say is the first step? It's introducing ourselves and getting in the door. If you're organizing with your coworkers, you may not need to introduce yourself. If it's a small enough workplace, everybody knows each other, all good. If you work at a big place, we were organizing a factory recently that has 1,700 people. Workers spoke 7 different languages, right? Then you got to explain quickly to somebody why you're there, and a lot of times you have these one-on-one conversations at people's homes, right? Or at a place where they feel comfortable. It's hard to have these conversations at work. Why?
There's people listening in.
Right? So we have these conversations in a place where people feel comfortable. You got to be able to confidently introduce yourself and get in the door. And here, this is where I think this is the most important part of an organizing visit, where we listen. As organizers, we use an 80-20. You're having an organizing conversation and you're not listening 80% of the time, then you're doing something wrong, right? Because if I come and I'm talking to Alejandra, picking on you guys because I can read your name tags more easily. Then I'm talking the whole time. Do I know what moves Alejandra? Do I know what she cares about at work? I might be able to give her a pretty speech about the union, but am I going to be able to convince her to take action if I don't know what's bothering her at work? 80-20, no, okay, that's not that hard. Next time you're having a conversation with somebody, keep an eye on that ratio. It's difficult, it's a skill to really deeply listen, and listen not as a place to wait and talk again, but really listen to somebody. And it can be hard to get the conversation started because this feels foreign to us a lot of times. But when we are able to make a genuine connection and really care and ask people what's happening in their workplace, it's actually, you'll see people unburden themselves, right? Because there's not many people in our lives who really deeply want to know what's going on with us at work, right? So listening and figuring out what moves people. The next is, all right, so you understand what moves people. Now you got to talk to them about how things can be different, right? Going from hopelessness to hope. There is actually a way to shift power in the workplace. And here's how we do it, right? This is the 20%. This is where you talk. So we're going to practice this part today. The vision of how things can be different. Inoculation. Anybody know what inoculation means? ¿Qué queremos decir con inoculación?
So you basically prepare them to what management might do. So it's like what the new term that we've been using. It's like when you get a vaccine to introduce the virus to your body so that they can produce your immune system, right? So it's a similar thing, just to prepare them. Instead of hearing from management, they get scared, they get freaked out. They're already mentally understand this might come up.
That's absolutely right. We are introducing a little bit of the box campaign into their system, giving them a heads up of what's coming so that we're prepared when it comes, right? I mentioned that we, did a strike vote when I very first started out in the union. My steward came to me and said, hey, the boss might call you into their office and they might try and scare you out of doing this, but we have a legal right to do this. And Sure enough, the boss called me into the office. And if my coworker had not warned me that that was coming, I probably would have been like a deer in headlights, right? And not known what to say and been mad because I didn't know a response. Instead, I trusted her even more because she had warned me about what happened and I was prepared. And I told the boss, I have the legal right to do this. She backed off. And and so if we tell people what's coming, we build trust and we prepare them. And it's not, it can be a scary conversation to have, but there's a really obvious book of tricks that the employers like to use. So it's pretty easy to, share with workers what might be coming up.
I just had one question. Is it illegal for them to question you when you're going through an election, about the election?
So it is illegal to intimidate and interrogate or surveil you. Like there are specific lines that the employer cannot cross.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And they are not supposed to ask you how you're going to vote in a union election, right? They're not supposed to intimidate you out of joining the union. So knowing our rights is really important.
Yes.
To know what they can and can't do. Absolutely. So we inoculate and then we move people to action. Here we call this one assess, agitate, and move to action because we ask people. We haven't asked. And when we get to this part of the conversation, after we've told them the plan of how we build power, we've prepared them that this isn't going to be easy, right? Give them a little taste of what we're going to have to do to get to this shift in power. Then we ask them, are you ready to join with your coworkers and take action, right? And if they're not ready yet, we use this as an opportunity to agitate them. So for example, I might say to Alejandra, okay, well, or to Jane, how long are you willing to wait? Right? Isn't this something that you wanted for your kids? Right? I know this is scary, but if we don't take action together now, when is that going to change? And I let her sit with it, right? And think about it. And then ask her again, right? And these conversations ideally are not ones that we have once and then we're done. Okay, we organize the union, right? It's about building relationships. We can come back to these conversations as we build trust with people. What's that?
That's like your note for inoculation.
What?
Prep for boss fight.
Yes.
Yeah. I have no expectation.
Yes. Okay, so we're gonna stop here. We're gonna go into this step next, which is the vision of the union plan. We're gonna talk about how we build power together, how we build a leadership and organizing committee. That's one of the key steps of our vision and plan. But we're gonna take a little break. Let folks get up, go to the bathroom, get some more coffee. So let's do 10 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna breeze through the other pieces quicker. All right, let's do 10 minutes, so 10:40. Let's come back. So we're gonna talk about leadership and committee building. So we all know and we talked about how when the workers stick together, we have more power, right? But how do we do this? How do we get the workers to stick together? How do we overcome all those obstacles we talked about? We have to recruit workers to the organizing committee. Tenemos que ejecutar los líderes, los trabajadores, a un comité de organización, right? So that they can help recruit their coworkers. If I'm working in a 1,700 person factory, I could be the best union organizer in the world. Am I going to be able to talk to everybody? No. Before the boss finds out? No. 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 We have to identify leaders in the workplace, recruit them to an organizing committee, and helps them have the skills to go have those organizing conversations with their coworkers, right? Organizing committee is our backbone for our plan to win power in the workplace. So let's say this picture is the workplace we're organizing. Vamos a suponer que eso es nuestro lugar de trabajo donde estamos organizando. So this boss is very greedy devil. And he decides to cut overtime. ¿No? Decide quitar el tiempo extra. So he already has his workers organized into 2 departments, no? Dos departamentos, administration and production. Those are the 2 teams of groups of workers here. And we have shifts, right? So we've got morning shift, swing shift, and night shift. This is a big factory. We can't reach everybody. There are different times. So what happens when this greedy boss cuts overtime? When people are only organized under the boss's scheme here. What happens when they cut workers, or when they cut overtime? What do we say over here? Maybe some folks are gonna complain. Maybe some people will quit and look for a new job. Most people are just gonna have to work harder, right? They're gonna maybe have to work faster, right? They're gonna speed up production because they're not paying overtime. We're gonna get injured. They're gonna take this stress home with them. They're gonna suffer, right? But things are not hopeless, right? Hay esperanza. Every workplace has a natural network of leaders, right? And workers organize themselves into groups naturally, right? ¿Verdad? Trabajadores se organizan ellos mismos en grupos, naturalmente. No necesariamente para mejorar las cosas en el trabajo, ¿no? Pero tienen grupos sociales. What are some of the ways that workers organize themselves naturally in the workplace? Yeah.
The time they take their breaks.
Yep. Time to take their breaks, right? Huh?
The team they're on.
The team they're on, absolutely. Dylan?
Language.
Language, ¿verdad? Gente que habla el mismo idioma, a veces se juntan. People who speak the same language. What else? Smokers, no, this is no joke, right? You're a union organizer, you gotta know exactly, or a community organizer, you gotta know exactly who the smokers are, because they're gonna be outside together. Absolutely. Also, it could be religion, neighborhoods, right? Where you live, where you come from, gender, right? Age, right? We may have the young workers and the old workers. So we have all kinds of natural organization happening. And workers, however organized they may be in their own groups, they're not working in the same direction towards the boss, right? They're not self-organized usually against the changes that the boss may want to make, like overtime. So what we gotta do is we gotta map out our workplace. We gotta figure out who those natural leaders are of each of those groups that workers are organizing. Tenemos que hacer una mapa de nuestro lugar de trabajo, ¿verdad? Y a identificar cuáles son los líderes naturales de todos esos diferentes grupos. Map the smokers, right? Map the women. We gotta map the folks who are just started, or the young ones, right? We gotta map everybody who speaks Punjabi, everybody who speaks Dari, Spanish, etc., Mixteco. We need to map out the natural groupings of our workers. And after we identify them, then we've got to recruit them, right, into the organizing committee. And that, if we do not have an organizing committee, right, this is one of the keys to winning our organizing campaign, an active, empowered organizing committee who is going to go out and have those organizing conversations. And this is not just for union organizing, right? This is for any kind of workplace organizing. Eso también puede ser para organizar lo que sea. No tiene que ser solamente sindicato, ¿no? Si queremos mover la gente a acción, tenemos que identificar los líderes. So what do we mean by a leader? What do we mean by a leader?
You're looking for the person who will speak out, or they're actually the ones organizing. Like they'll be the person that, oh, let's go ask, because they've either been there the longest or they've had the most experience. But if you're like, hey, who would know? If I would walk into an area, I would ask. Okay, I'm gonna break it down even more, because I go to a custodian because their secret power is being invisible to people. So to me, going to a custodian, they know who's going to be fired above everybody else, and no one pays attention to them, unfortunately. But that he's an underground, to me, he's an underground person, and he will get me to the leader of who would know what was going on that.
Beautiful. You're already getting to our next step, which is how to identify. So a lot of times we'll have people say like, it's the person that, speaks the loudest, right? It's the one that gets up and gives, speeches or fights back against boss. Maybe that
It's the
person.
one who everybody wants to follow.
The one that
Yes.
cares.
What's that?
The one that cares.
It may be the one that cares. It is the one that people follow, right? A leader has followers, right? And a lot of times in organizing, we can get caught up on the worker that is the most eloquent, that is the most fearless. But not everybody follows the one that's the most eloquent or the most fearless, ¿verdad? Puede ser que tenemos trabajadores que dan un discurso, ¿no? Que hablan muy bien, muy fuertemente, o que no tienen miedo. Y puede ser que ellos son líderes. Pero lo que distingue un líder es que tiene seguidores, ¿verdad? We have to find the people who others follow. Now, does that mean that because there's somebody that people follow that they're for the union?
Nope.
Nope, not
Sometimes
necessarily.
they're for themselves. That's why they're that quote unquote metal, because they will do what the administrator wants.
Maybe, or they could be out for others, right? But just because you're a leader in the workplace does not mean naturally that you're going to be pro-union.
I've also noticed that sometimes the leaders don't want to be the leader.
I think that's an important point. It's not, if I were to say, okay, who wants to get up here and speak in front of everybody? Somebody may be willing and may raise their hand, but that may not be the same person, right? Like, a leader may be somebody in a workplace who is reluctant to be the leader, right? But people follow them because they trust them, because they're charismatic, right? Because they believe in them. So a leader is something that's followed. Yes.
I also found recently that some of our best leaders have been people who started off anti-union, but they didn't realize how much the union actually was helping them until you got conversations.
Absolutely, yes. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to assessments. Un líder puede hasta ser alguien que esté contra la unión, que está contra la organización que está organizando, ¿no? Pero si es un líder, tenemos que ver si podemos moverles hasta nuestro lado, right? But if they're a true leader, we're going to want to invest time figuring out if we can move them to our side. So how do we find out who the leader in a workplace is? I think you were getting to this. We ask people, right? We might ask people, who do you trust? What else might we ask to find out who's a real leader in a workplace? ¿Qué más debemos preguntar para saber quién es el líder en el lugar de trabajo?
Who's knowledgeable?
Sometimes it's somebody who's been around a long time. They may not be leaders, but those are good things to ask. What else?
Who has
So we do want to ask who has boss's ear, but that may be a leader for us, and it may be a leader for the boss, right? So we want to find that out, but we want to be careful going for that person.
If they would, have stake or interest in seeing things improve.
That might be something we ask somebody if you think they're a leader. But to identify who's a leader, who do you trust? Who do people go to, right, when they have problems? ¿A quién va la gente cuando tienen problemas en el lugar de trabajo? ¿No? ¿Quién es la persona confiable a que todos van? ¿No? Who also, sometimes we don't think about this, but like, who organizes like the social stuff?
The potluck.
Yes,
Potluck person.
exactly. Who does the potluck, the birthdays, right? Like, who is the one that can put together a party at their house y todos van, right? That everyone's gonna go to that person's party, that person's stuff. We need to think about who are the social leaders in the workplace. Yeah?
It's also your team players. Like, you're gonna find the person who's willing to do the overtime. That's the other person you're looking for, because that person, they're truly not a leader, but they're a true team player that you're gonna be able to, I call them the go-to. Your overtime person, the person that's willing to come in for you, the person that's willing to stay late.
Yeah, that, and again, that may be the person that's willing to stay late. Maybe a leader for the boss, and maybe a leader for us, right? But who do people go to? Who organizes parties, social events? So, yeah, who do people see as like a mother, father figure, abuelita? We want to map out the workplace and try to identify the natural leaders, not just in one group, right? We want to identify leaders in all of the groups. Debemos estar identificando los líderes en todos los grupos. No podemos quedar solo con la gente que habla español, ni solo inglés. We can't just find leaders in a group that is the English speakers or the Spanish speakers. We need to make sure we're identifying leaders from all of the groups. Otherwise, the boss is going to be able to divide us, right? Because we are not representative organizing. So let's go back, after we've ID'd our leaders, let's go back to our greedy boss who cut all our overtime. So if we've recruited, we've successfully identified our leaders, we've recruited them to our organizing committee, and now we're working as a unit, right? We're having meetings together, we're planning what to do about that cutting overtime. What's going to happen, right, if we're now unifying the whole workforce using our organizing committee? What's the boss going to do if everybody is organizing against the cutting overtime? It may try and divide us. Is it going to be easier or harder for the boss to deal with this in his own organization? It's going to be a lot harder, right? Because all of these groups, these are our leaders, right? We've identified our little halo leaders in each group.
To be inoculated.
Yeah. Now, we're scared them. We're scared. We are now, the organizing committee meets, plans, organizes actions together, right? If I'm the boss and I just cut overtime for all of us, and I have to deal with like a couple of you come and complain, but I realize I can get away with it. What happens if the next week, after we've planned an action with our organizing committee, everybody comes wearing the same sticker or the same shirt? What is the message to me as the boss?
You're organizing.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Right. They're united, right? And so we build our organizing committees. We build representative organizing committees so that we can plan and build power in the workplace, right?
So even an action like just wearing shirts like that can bring action.
Yeah, absolutely. We call these sometimes issue campaigns, right? We have small fights over specific issues that are a big problem in the workplace. We want small, winnable victories, so we get people feeling like the union, right? This is a step, and this is just, that's going to be one part of our plan, right? We still got to organize to get people to a union election. We've still got to get people to sign cards and take other public actions and figure out how to get to a contract. But this is the first step in showing people that they can win fights against the boss, right? And we have to get people getting away from the feeling of like, I can support the union in private, right? Because you haven't shifted power if people are, and we're going to talk at the end about the stages of a campaign and when we do private versus public organizing actions, but this is part of us feeling like we can build power in the workplace. All right, so one of the ways, when we map out the workplace, one of the tools we have for union organizing is what we call an assessment scale. And mapping and charting are really important tools for any organizer's tool belt, because again, if we have 5 people in the workplace, it's very easy to keep track of. If we have a large workplace, even 30, 40 people, we're going to want to know who's on our side, who's ready to take action, who's not, because we want to know when we're ready to go from this, right? When we're starting to do this, when we've identified our leaders, and when we're ready to actually take that public action. Because if we don't know where people are, right, we might try and do a public action and only 3 people show up wearing their shirts. What does that show? It doesn't show nothing. It shows the boss that we are not organized, right? So we want to make sure that we know where people are. So when we have our list in the workplace where we've mapped out and identified who are our leaders in the different groups that we talked about, we often give people an assessment. And this is not a one-time assessment. I don't say, okay, Josefina is a 1 today, she's a leader, and so I'm going to assume she's always going to be a 1. Right? No. These are ongoing assessments that we are constantly reevaluating. So, number 1 is a leader in the organizing campaign. Again, what does a leader mean?
They got followers.
Tiene seguidores, they got followers, exactly. And they're willing to take action, right? A leader has shown us that they're willing to take action. 2 is a supporter. So we have evidence of their support. Maybe they've signed a card. Pass out flyers, yeah. But the difference between a 1 and a 2 is that a 1 is moving other people, right? 1 is moving other people. 2 is a supporter, and you want to turn your 2s into 1s. But a 2 is a supporter. 3, undecided, right? 3 is somebody who's on the fence. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they don't have confidence yet in the plan. Maybe they want to see where other people
They
are.
want to see what you can do for them first before they make that move to a 1.
Yeah, that absolutely may be. They want to see collective action. 4 is somebody who's against the union. 5 is somebody who's against the union and who is a leader, right? And so let's talk a little bit more about 5s. So we heard that like sometimes 5s could be our strongest allies, right? I was working on a campaign to organize construction workers in Los Angeles. And we had a guy who, his name was Johnny. He had been the most hardcore anti-union guy in the entire union. This was the plumbers, right? Absolutely hated the union. And everybody followed Johnny, right? So he almost decertified the union because he was so upset with something that had happened. Well, thankfully, one of the organizers realized after a while, like, I can't just ignore him. Because he's against the union doesn't mean I can't have a conversation with him. Sat down with Johnny, talked through his issue, figured out with him how to get his coworkers together to take action. They fixed it, and slowly but surely, Johnny started getting involved in the union. We did an organizing drive after the Janus versus AFSCME decision for them to increase their membership. Johnny was the superstar. We got 1,000 union authorization cards in 10 days, and it was him activating his coworkers, working together with other trades to get people to sign up. The union took him out on leave, so a month, he would go out and they got their membership from 45% to 75%, right? So you don't ignore your 5s, it's the moral.
What was his problem?
He didn't like something around the pension, how the pension.
So did he understand he's a part of that?
He did eventually, right? And he got his coworkers with him to take action. He just saw the union as part of the problem until he realized he would be part of the solution. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some unions use a slightly different tool, but this can be very important when we go have our one-on-one conversations with people. Afterwards, in our database, it could be an easel pad, it could be an online Google sheet. We give people assessments, right? And we try and make sure those assessments are moving so that we know before we take a public action, before we file for an election, we know where people are and how willing they are to move their coworkers.
Sorry, can you briefly summarize it in Spanish?
Sure. Entonces eso es un herramienta que usamos para evaluar ¿qué tanto apoya la unión o la organización la gente? Entonces, es una herramienta que usamos después de una conversación uno a uno. Entonces, vamos a suponer que yo estoy hablando con Aurelia y veo que ella tiene mucho potencial, ella es líder en su lugar de trabajo, pero es contra el sindicato. Entonces, yo la marco como 5. Pero luego veo que después de muchas conversaciones, ella vea que sí puede trabajar con sus compañeros de trabajo para mejorar las cosas. Puede hasta convertir en un 1, ¿no? La diferencia entre un 1 y un 2 es que un 1 tiene seguidores y está dispuesto y ha mostrado que tomó acción para organizar, ¿no? No solamente ha hablado. A 1 hasn't just talked about taking action. A 1 has shown you they've taken action. So when we do our first house visit, you're very rarely going to mark somebody as a 1, right? Because they haven't had a chance to show you yet that they're a leader. Y un 2 sí es un seguidor, ¿verdad? Sí está a favor, sí apoya, pero no está necesariamente moviendo a otra gente. Un 3 es neutral, no decidió todavía. Tenemos que seguir con la conversación. Un 4 es contra y un 5 es un líder contra. Okay? So she walked you through, even though you're at a place where you believe in the mission of the organization, we've seen lots of nonprofit organizing happening recently, right? Our unions have unions, right? We as union staff often have unions because we believe in workers' rights to have a collective voice no matter what the end of our organization, whether they're for-profit or non-profit, right? And so you walked her through how to have these conversations with her coworkers, to start finding out how her coworkers feel about this.
I kind of went a little bit deeper with her because her telling me she's nonprofit, and I'm like, I know, you are working off your passion. This isn't work, it's not work to her, but it is work, and she should be compensated because the union that she's working for, the company she's working for, the people, her members are getting paid nice. And they're getting paid nicely for what she wants to do to make sure that they're being compensated. So for her doing that, she should be compensated. And with her passion, I'm like, well, you know, there's other people that are feeling just as passionate as her. Why not just do your work? Because you're doing this to make someone else's life better. So we went and broke it down to, let's see what your coworkers feel. Let's have that conversation. Let's see what we can collaborate, and then try to have a conversation with your boss. That was the big thing, to have the conversation with the boss.
Right, and we want to make sure we're organized before we have the conversation with the boss or before we file for a union election. But work we love is still work, right? Work we love is still work, and we've got to talk to our coworkers about whether they feel the same way. Anybody else have a conversation where they used something that they felt like worked for them? Alguien que tuvo una conversación donde encontraron algo que sí funcionó en la conversación para darles la visión.
Como lo que estábamos conversando no era exactamente de crear una unión, sino que era como crear una acción colectiva. Y era primeramente como identificar el problema que tiene el trabajador, y basado en ese problema es cómo el poder económico de quién lo tiene.
So Aurelia was having a conversation not necessarily about how to form a union, but how to take collective action. And so they talked about who has the economic power.
Y cómo el patrón pues tiene más dinero y el trabajador no, y la injusticia que hay de que el patrón pueda tener todo lo necesario ya
quien está batallando más para mantener su hogar, su familia.
So they talked about the imbalance of power, right? How the boss has all the money, the worker does not, and the boss is making these decisions at the cost of the worker who's trying to get by, right? To survive, to pay for housing.
Y el poder que tiene el trabajador para mover al resto de sus compañeros a que tengan esa voz colectiva y tomen esa demanda, sí, o sea, hagan esa voz colectiva y demandar que de que han identificado el robo de salario que está haciendo el patrón.
So they talked about the power that the workers have, right, collectively, to identify the wage theft that's happening, and
Y aquí creo que lo más era de que como el robo de salario está haciendo más rico al patrón y como los trabajadores no están diciendo nada, el patrón puede darse cuenta, puedo seguirles robando y a lo mejor hasta más porque ellos no están diciendo nada.
And so she talked to her about how right now workers aren't saying anything about that wage theft, and so the boss believes that he can get away with it, right?
Entonces era eso de mover al trabajador, mover al trabajador o hacer consciente de que mientras no alce la voz, siga viendo que no le están pagando lo que deben, el patrón se sigue enriqueciendo y el trabajador está batallando más. Es cuando el trabajador tenía un poquito más de coraje y decir, pues no voy a permitir que si ahorita me está robando un poquito, como no digo nada, me siga robando más. Entonces tengo que alzar.
So she in that conversation, she's helping the worker develop consciousness, right, about how the wage theft can continue or they can stop it collectively. And coraje se traduzcaría como anger, ¿verdad? So she used an important word, right? Anger. A lot of times in the vision, we're going from hopelessness and fear to hope and to anger, right? What is happening in our workplaces very often is a source of great frustration and anger. And if we can move people away from fear and apathy to hope and to anger at the boss at what's happening, that's when people feel like they can build power, right? So that's part of what we're doing in the vision. Fidelina, ¿quedaste convencida? ¿Sí? She was convinced.
Pero también mostrar que sí se puede ganar. Lo que yo le decía a nosotros, como ejemplo, ¿verdad? Era como ejemplo decir, a nosotros tenemos experiencia haciendo esto y tantos trabajadores han ganado por alzar la voz y por decir que esto es justo. Entonces, podemos seguir trabajando contigo, con tus compañeros de trabajo para poder cambiar eso que fue cuando dijo sí.
Okay. So she struck another important note, which is to share that we have experience doing this, both individually and collectively, right? In our organizations, in labor history, right? We know that workers can change their conditions. It is something that you can win. And so when she convinced her that, yes, we have this experience, we have a plan, and we can work with you to build this power, that's when she said yes, right? She gave her a vision of how they could do that in their workplace. So that's what we're practicing there. Okay, give yourselves a round of applause. Nobody loves to do role plays, but whenever we do the 3-day, you have to role play for 3 days in a row, people are like, I hated it. And thank you for making us do it, right? Like, this is how we get out of our discomfort, right? We lean into it, right? We practice having these conversations with our coworkers. So we're going to go through our final point, which is the stages of a campaign. So this is, how do we go from, I'm unhappy with things at work, to my coworkers and I have organized, and we have a union, and we have a contract, and we've changed our conditions. Right? What are the stages that we generally see in organizing campaigns? So we're going to start with stage 1, preparation. So if we need a plan, we don't start talking to everybody at work about the union know all the obstacles that are against us, from fear to the law to all of these other things. So what are some things that we might want to do in our preparation stage? If we have a workplace where we're thinking about organizing. Research. What might we want to research? Investigación, ¿verdad? ¿Qué tipo de investigación? ¿Cuáles cosas queremos investigar?
What are the contentious issues?
What are the issues, right? What are the problems in this workplace?
Law. What is the power structure working presently?
And what do we mean by the power structure working presently?
The boss and the network of capital that, the leadership on the other side.
Absolutely, right? Is this a mom and pop, one single store? Or is this Starbucks, right? We want to know the power structure. How is the employer organized, right? Just like we're organized, often the employer is organized, has networks, is part of something larger. So power structure, what else do we want to know?
Activity history. Has there been an organizing activity before?
Absolutely.
Yeah, litigation.
What's that?
Litigation.
Organizing history, lawsuits. Si la gente ahí han organizado en el pasado, ¿qué es la estructura de la compañía? ¿Es una compañía chiquita o es una multinacional? ¿No? ¿Cómo está organizando? Si hay demandas en el pasado o actualmente, there's lawsuits in the past or currently. Anything else we want to research?
Kind of, I guess, just temperature, like how much work, will it take, to get them from, this kind of base level to that kind of first contract, and then how just the employees, are receptive to the idea.
Temperature meaning that for the workers, how
Yeah.
are they feeling about it? Yeah. I would say we will maybe do a little bit of that here, right? In the beginning stages, and then we'll continue with that. So
Thinking about it right now, can we just do an evaluation on the business itself?
yeah. So that's absolutely, I would say that's part of the power structure. Like we can call this different things, but we want to assess the business. Do they have a lot of resources? Do they have a lot of profits? Is this a non-union grocery store in a market that is completely union? The opposite, right? Are all of the options for workers around there low wage, non-union, right? We just want to understand. None of these things mean that we can't organize there. Ninguna de esa información quiere decir que no podemos organizar allá, pero significa que sí tenemos que estar informados. We want to know what the obstacles are, exactly. So some of the other things we might want to do is we might want to do what we call list building, right? And so this is a big company. How many workers do we have there? How many workers are in each department? How many workers are in each shift, right? And this is going to continue throughout, right? But for organizers, your goal is that list of workers and that contact info, right? Because you can't have one-on-one conversations with people if you don't know how to reach them, right? And so we do list building. And we could do a whole nother session on how to do list building, right? Everything from very creative, like dumpster diving, to having people organize parties, right? Or get the birthday list or whatever it is, right? We have to be creative because the employer is going to be organizing against us. So we want to do list building, and we want to do folks remember we talked about mapping, right? We want to do mapping.
I want to put a selfish plug-in for geofencing.
Please.
It's a tool where you can digitally draw a map around a location, and then when their cell phone pings, whatever they do on their cell phone, you can start capturing people's digital information. It sounds creepy, but they're doing it for consumer. That's why everybody gets the customized ads on your phone. This is something that's high-level organizing that not a lot of unions are using right now. But if you're interested and you can't get to people inside the workplace, you can geofence that and start tracking folks. What's that?
The bosses are using
The bosses, the companies, all the consumer groups. So anyway, this is just a really small off-the-wall thing that most organizers don't deal with, but
How
it's
do
a
we
good.
do it?
It's a piece of technology, right? let's connect afterward if you're really interested in that.
That'll be the 201. So, we want to be doing all of these things. We also want to have a plan, right? We want to start thinking, once we've got this information, we know some of what's going on in this company. If this is a grocery store, right? What are the companies that supply the grocery store? What is important in terms of their market? Who do they care about? What consumers do they care about? What are the points of pressure, right, for this company or this entity? If it's a nonprofit, maybe it's their board of trustees, right? We want to make sure they're upholding their stated values to their board of trustees. So we really want to figure out where are the points in which we can engage that company, right? Pressure points, yeah, exactly. And we want to use this to help us pull together a plan. We may not know all the pieces of that plan, but we want to find out, for example, if you've got, again, a board of directors, and somebody from that board of directors is in my local church, I'm going to want to know that, right? Because maybe I have a one-on-one conversation with them about how workers are trying to improve conditions there. And that is part of our plan, right? Is how do people reach leadership in the company. Okay, so that's stage 1. Let's look at stage 2. So this is leadership building. This is where we're recruiting, identifying and recruiting our leaders for our organizing committee. Etapa 2 es donde estamos identificando y reclutando nuestros líderes para el comité de organización. So, why do we want to, we haven't gone public yet. We're still underground, right? We're still trying to keep this from the boss. Why do we want to build our organizing committee and identify our leaders before we go public?
We need help.
We need help, yes.
I need help.
Also to inoculate the workers first, before management, and also to see what is, if we can get the majority of the workers support. So their assessment.
Yeah, historically, leadership is not, or ownership is not like.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. We want to ID and recruit leaders for our organizing committee. And we need them, right? We need people to be engaged and involved to build power and to be able to get to a majority support. And so what are things that our organizing committee can do to build support, to get us unified, acting as one group? How do they do that? What are some things they might do?
Information dissemination.
How?
Well, because if it's, a big workplace, you can't go around and talk to every single person, but you can at least bring, all the leaders themselves into the room, and you can tell them, kind of what they're thinking, and then they can disseminate on to workers, but then it can also come back up, where the workers would then talk to, their leader, and then all those leaders would then come back to you.
Yes. So you can bring your organizing committee together. So I've got folks from the night shift, I've got women, I've got Mixteco speakers, I have Spanish speakers, English speakers. I've got my representative organizing committee, and we are going to put together a plan for how to reach all of the workers in our respective shifts, departments, social groups, right? And we're going to be building our assessment of where folks are. And we're going to be doing this through one-on-one conversations, right? So we're going to be using that. And so you're going to want to make sure you're providing training to your organizing committee, right? For how to have effective one-on-one organizing conversations. And if you're part of a campaign that has paid organizers from a community organization or a union, si haces parte de una unión o un grupo comunitario que tiene staff, ¿no? Que tiene personal pagado, you want to make sure that you have workers going with you on these visits. Quieres asegurar que tienen los propios trabajadores junto contigo haciendo esas visitas, esas conversaciones, y que ellos están tomando responsabilidad para crecer el apoyo.
When you say the organizing teams, would you suggest, like, if you're dealing with a bigger organization, to have a team, and then each person on that team can
Yeah, so you, normally with the organizing committee, that's absolutely right. We wanna have people take assignments, right? Take responsibility for the folks that follow them, right? And depending on how big, we wanna have, usually we say at least 10% represented in our organizing committee, right? So if we have 100 people, our organizing committee should be at least 10, right? But if it's bigger, but at least. And it needs to represent all the different groupings of workers. And it's made up of leaders, right? So we want to make sure that they're responsible for having conversations with the people that they meet, right? That they move, that they're in conversation with, that they work with, etc. And that's how we're going to make sure that, yeah, that we're reaching everyone.
Do you suggest we, let's say it's an organization with 4 different departments, you suggest we focus on separate departments and we get all 4 at the same time?
So you want to identify leaders from all 4. You have to start where you go, right? So like over here, if you start with, let's see, the most obvious people, let's say somebody came to you as an organizer and said, all right, I'm in the kitchen, and I know who's a leader in my department, and housekeeping, we also have somebody who's like ready to go, right? So we don't know about janitorial, we don't know about all the others, but we start there, right? And then they have conversations, and we identify somebody from janitorial, and that's how we're building our organizing thing. So you start where you know, and you want to make sure that as soon as possible you have as many departments as possible. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is our leadership stage, and again, we want to make sure workers are part of these organizing conversations, leading these organizing conversations, and building that support. So, and I think Jane said it maybe, that we're inoculating, right? Even at this early stage, we're talking to people, or we're talking to our leaders about what the boss campaign could look like, what they might do, right? They may threaten us. They may try and fire people. We gotta be ready, right? They may try and isolate us, cut our hours, or, they may use the carrot. Some employers like to try that as well. They do either or both. Okay, you know what? I think this guy's pretty vocal about the union. You get a promotion, right? You're actually not in the bargaining unit anymore, right? Or everybody gets a, 25-cent raise, right? Now, is that raise going to stay after I'm not worried about the threat of organizing anymore? Maybe not, right? Or we're going to have a pizza party. What? We're a family here. What? There's no need for this. My door is always open. We can talk, right? So there's a whole book of tricks that are really common when employers get scared that workers are going to take collective action. So we want to be inoculating even before we go public, so that people are ready. Okay. So now we're going to talk about our next stage, building power, right? And this is where we've got our research done, right? We've got a good list. We have our organizing committee built. Now we're going to do a public launch of the campaign, right? And a lot of unions, I will say, like sometimes we try and skip the building power stage, right? And just like let's go from underground. We'll do the election. You don't have to tell anybody you support the union, right? It'll be a secret, and it is a secret election, right? But if the boss knows nobody's willing to publicly say that they're organized and they're going to fight with their coworkers, then you haven't won yet, right? You haven't gotten people feeling like they have power, right? And so you can get to an election and you may win it, but you still have a fight. Still have the fight to get people to publicly take action and confront their boss together. So you're going to have to do it at some point, right?
And that's where you might have a problem because they're going to look at the elected people as the superhero. They're like, you're elected to this, you're the organizer, you're the president of ours, and they're going to expect you to do the work instead of them feeling the power that they have. And that's where you have to be very careful with your leaders and very careful because even though they're leaders, you still have to recognize that the members are the true power and they need to be able to see that they're the power.
right? If the union is somebody else who's coming in from outside, and we don't understand that actually the union is us, right? Then ultimately, we're not gonna be able to go public, right? Because it's somebody else's thing, and yeah, we'll help them out by signing a card, and we hope we'll get some good services in that contract that they're gonna negotiate, but we haven't built power, right? Unless we understand that we've gotta take action. So we talked about a couple of them earlier. What are some things that we could do to take action? What are some actions we could take at this stage publicly?
Wearing the shirts, where you're going public in support.
So wearing shirts, buttons, yeah, showing, like, this is showing support, right? And then I heard press conference.
Demonstrations.
Why is a press conference helpful?
Because the public will know what we're doing, and then when the company tries to retaliate,
Or back down.
they'll make it more to, because again, it's all about the members being supported, and when we get the public to support the members, it'll make it a lot harder for the retaliation to come.
Yeah. So en ese fase estamos lanzando públicamente, ¿verdad? Ahorita estamos mostrando que estamos juntos, que estamos unificados. Vamos a mostrar a través de playeras, a través de botones. Tal vez vamos a hacer una conferencia de prensa, ¿no? Para que el público nos apoya y podemos contar con nuestros aliados. Press conference is a good time to show the employer that we're not alone, that we have allies of community groups, of faith groups, of other unions, what have you.
It also gives us a chance to outline the reason why the union is forming.
I kind of like to refer it as you turn on the light and the roaches are gonna run.
Yeah, we can make public demands. Podemos lanzar las exigencias, ¿no? Lo que queremos. And that messaging is important, right? And here a lot of times we can fall too much in like just talking about pay, right? And so people think, oh, they just want more money, right? And that is a valid, necessary reason that we organize. But also it's about respect, it's about dignity, right? And treatment, and safety, right? There are all kinds of reasons why people want to have a voice in their workplace. So this is a chance for us to message and to put the public message to the employer. Do right, let your employees freely decide, right? If they want to exercise their right to fully. The other thing we could do, a lot of times, do flyers with photos. So some of our unions that do a lot of new organizing, every time they have a public launch of a campaign, in this stage, they're getting it ready, right? Okay, you're gonna join the organizing committee? Great. That means we're gonna do a flyer and it's gonna have your face on it, right? And I'm gonna have a little statement. I support the union and here's why. And we're gonna do it, it's not just gonna be you, right? It's gonna be the entire organizing committee, or it's gonna be workers from all different departments. We're saying like, we're in this together, right? And if anything happens to one of us, we're all gonna be there, right? So we're showing publicly our support and our unity. Let's see, actions. So here's a time when we might wanna do a march on the boss. Anybody been part of a delegation or a march on the boss? Yeah? So here, I was organizing with helping hotel workers organize, supporting an action at a hotel in the Inland Empire. We didn't have a union yet. They had not been legally recognized, but they were public, right? And so those of us from other unions in the community joined workers in marching on the boss and delivering a petition. And let me tell you, if you've ever been delegated or marched on, you will never forget it. There are few ways that are scarier for the boss than to be marched on. You don't have a dialogue, you're not there to have a long drawn-out conversation or to try and negotiate the contract. You're there to show power, right? People chant together, they march together, they deliver something, they are noisy and powerful and unified. and then they may go back to work, right? But, so at one of our organizing trainings, the time I forgot to get coffee.
How dare you?
I got marched on. Let me tell you, I will never forget coffee again. It physically shows, right, a shift of power, right, collective actions. So these are the kinds of things that also show us as workers, right? We physically feel our power, and so does the boss. Anybody want to add anything there?
Demonstrations?
Demonstrations like public rallies? Yep, absolutely. Okay, and here is oftentimes in a union campaign, somewhere in this building power, you may file for a union election.
Well, that's not even done until stage 3.
Yeah, generally you want to wait until you're here, right? And what does it mean to file for a union election? ¿Qué quiere decir someter una petición para una elección de sindicato?
You delegate, you're voting for the leaders that you want in those positions that are doing the,
That is a union election of our leadership, that's absolutely right, but this is talking about when you're at a place that has never had or doesn't have a union and is organizing to be recognized for the first time.
So you're now the workers are filing a union election to have representation in their workplace.
Yes, so you are petitioning the agency of the government, which is the National Labor Relations Board, right? That's the federal agency that oversees our right to organize, unless we're in agriculture or in a few other industries, or public sector workers, right? Then it's PERB or ALRB. But you are petitioning that agency for an election. And so there are different ways to do this. Sometimes we just demand that the employer recognize the majority of cards saying that they're pro-union, but essentially you're making an official legal recognition for the employer to recognize that you have a union. Under the National Labor Relations Board, you have to have at least 30% of workers in order to file for a union election in support, right? Signing cards saying, I want a union. Do you think that's a good number to file with?
No.
Why not?
Because that doesn't get you the election win.
Yeah. Entonces, bajo la ley federal, tiene que tener por lo menos 30%, ¿no? De apoyadores para un sindicato. Es diferente para aquí en California para trabajadores de campo, pero no es recomendado que metes la petición con 30% de apoyo. ¿Por qué? Porque el empleador va a quebrar esa campaña si no tienen la mayoría. We recommend as organizers generally that you file an election once you have a supermajority. So 65, 70% if possible, at least 60%, right? Of workers saying, I want a union before you file a union election. Because you still have a period of at least a couple weeks, right? Elections are happening faster now, but at least a couple weeks before that election happens. And once the employer knows, they're gonna do everything they can to try and stop people from voting yes, right? Legal and illegal. So that's what we do. And then hopefully when the election comes and you're continuing to have these one-on-one conversations, even more important that you keep your assessments up that we talked about, where are people in the 1 to 4, to make sure you have a majority and that the union is recognized, right? And you can use this for any public action you're doing. No tiene que ser una elección sindical, no puede ser cualquier acción pública. Estás evaluando constantemente cómo está el apoyo de la gente. Estás usando ese herramienta de la mapa y la evaluación para ver si en el día que llega, si tiene la mayoría. So you're using your evaluation tool, or 1, 2, 3, 4, you're mapping, you're making sure that you're having one-on-one conversations so that you have majority support on that day the election happens. And then the real fight starts. Then we gotta win our first contract. So what might we do to win, to get ready to win a first contract? We have an organizing committee over here. We have folks that voted for the union. We got recognized. Now, what do we do to make sure that the boss actually negotiates with us? ¿Qué hacemos ahorita? Ya ganamos la unión, pero ahora empieza la lucha. Tenemos que asegurar que el patrón siente con nosotros y firme un acuerdo.
Contract committee.
Yeah.
We're gonna have some, you finally got the boss's ear for what are we going to do? What do we want?
And how do we find out what we want?
We talk to the members.
We could do, so we turn our organizing committee into a contract committee, right? We continue organizing. The organizing is not done just because we got union recognition. We continue, we turn into a contract committee. We want to find out what are people's priorities. A lot of times we do that by doing a bargaining survey. We make sure we understand what people's priorities are and what their bottom line is. And our contract committee is responsible for getting everybody who voted for the union active and engaged in the negotiation process.
I have a question. When we were doing our, where they're at in the levels, we do, I've been taught that we do what matters to them, like at the bottom, when they have, the 1 to 5, they have to put down, their minimum information. We can also use that, like what mattered to them, why would they want to, some want wages, and we can like go through our surveys.
So we had all these one-on-one conversations, right? We ID people, we know the issues that are prominent in the workplace, right? We use all that information. We also want to engage people in understanding and being part of the process of demanding from the employer, what are the priorities, what do they want to see change in their working conditions, and part of the negotiating. Some of our unions have a very closed negotiation process, right? Just a few people are elected and a few people know what's happening, excuse me, at the table until the contract is signed, right? And they vote on it. But there's I would say like a renewed movement for open bargaining. And what does that mean? That means, for example, the hotel workers in Los Angeles, who I don't know if folks have seen, have been on strike, right? Really powerful strikes by hotel workers. They have bargaining. They put their employers in the middle of the room in a square, and then they surrounded the square with 500 workers for the bargaining session. Pusieron el grupo de empleadores, los grandes dueños de hoteles, en un triángulo o un rectángulo en el medio del cuarto, y luego pusieron 500 trabajadores de los hoteles alrededor, ¿no? They are continuing to use collective power in the bargaining, right? So that those owners do not forget for a second the power of that collective action, right? So we want to make sure that we're engaging people, contract committee, bargaining survey. We want to do public actions. We want to involve our allies. And I would say we want to make sure that all workers are informed at every stage at the important developments in negotiations, right? And that they feel invested in what they're part of it, right? And they're continuing to push. So. Ajá.
Y cuando empieza la negociación, lo que yo había escuchado, ¿verdad? Es que cuando empieza la negociación, no todos los trabajadores vienen a la negociación para, de que si negocian pocos, pueden, como no va a haber muchas voces, y si vienen todos los trabajadores y al final los patrones dicen, bueno, estás pidiendo esto, pero dice 70% de esto, pero yo te quiero dar 50 o 30, aceptas. Y como si los otros trabajadores que están allí dicen, no, pues estamos bien, que no tenemos 30, está bien. ¿Cómo pasa eso? Según yo, no he hecho, no tengo experiencia, pero he escuchado, ¿no? Mientras menos personas estén en esa negociación, es mejor para no tener muchas cosas. ¿El resto de los trabajadores hablan o nada más es para observar?
So Aurelia brings up a very important point, which is the balance. Like, if you have all those workers there, and for example, the boss says, like, okay, you guys want 60, 70% improvement or raise, And some of the workers are like, yeah, I'll take it, right? How do you balance having all those workers there with having discipline, right? And agreement and unity in negotiations. Because if the employer can play you off each other, then it's not effective, right? So, es una muy buena pregunta. So, generally, I would say what unions do, and the folks who are union leaders or members in the room should chime in with what you guys do, is you have an elected bargaining committee. Eligen a un comité. Y ese comité está capacitado para hacer las decisiones. Y hasta entre ellos, entre ese comité, normalmente solo uno o dos personas hablan a la vez, ¿no? Y ellos reúnen juntos afuera de la reunión con el empleador para decidir qué vamos a proponer y qué vamos a decir, ¿no? Tiene que ser súper disciplinada. Es súper importante que esté abierto y que o es tal vez más poderoso si esté abierto, pero tiene que ser súper disciplinado. Y los trabajadores que vienen tienen que estar de acuerdo con que ese comité que han elegido, solo ellos tienen el poder de entrar en las negociaciones. Muchas veces lo que pasa es que el comité trae esas propuestas al grupo más grande y tienen que votar a favor o no, ¿no? Entonces es como una democracia unificada, ¿no?
¿Pero eso ha pasado o apenas quieren implementarlo en los sindicatos?
No, sí ha pasado. So, déjame hacer la traducción. So, the question is like, how do you maintain message discipline, right? If you've got open bargaining, you've got hundreds of people. What if the employer makes a suggestion of like, yeah, I'll give you 30% instead of 60%. And there's a group of workers that are like, yeah, I'll take it, right? So you have to make sure that there's discipline and that you have an elected negotiating committee, right? And that they are the ones that are empowered to make proposals. And usually, even they have met separately and privately before they bring proposals to the employer. And so it's not like everybody talks and you have to be unified and have an agreement. And a lot of times what will happen is like the bargaining committee may bring proposals back before there's an agreement. And different unions do it a different way. You get buy-in from the membership, and ultimately the whole membership has to vote to ratify a contract. Right? Any folks want to jump in?
Yeah, we usually, we always tell, especially the bargaining team, the members and everything else, there's a lot of, there should be discourse when we're doing it. But that when the employer comes into the room, that we are in solidarity the whole time. We don't disagree with each other. We don't challenge each other while we're talking. We stay there and we are, even when we get the proposal and it's not something we want to see, we don't give them anything while they're in the room. When they leave the room, you can go ahead and freely say whatever you like. We have always usually elected a speaker in the room so we have one message going at them. And so we do also open up the room to the other bargaining team members to also speak. But beforehand, we all make sure we're all on the same message so that they're not getting 30 or 40 different messages and trying to figure out and decipher what.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. And I would say unions do a whole range. So there's unions now that use open bargaining using still that same discipline, right? Like there's one voice and one message, and you can have full democracy when we're together, not at the table with the employer, but we speak with one voice that we've decided on beforehand when we're with the employer. So lots of unions are using this open bargaining or more open bargaining, understanding that we continue to show the employer power when we're at the bargaining.
It's almost like Alan, if we're talking about government, when the president leaves the country, the idea that nobody in our own government is supposed to be poorly of this. Right? So it's the idea we're on foreign territory when they come to the room, so we are going to give them.
Yeah, so having a unified front, right? We want to be making sure that we're showing power, but also showing. So, and then ultimately, once we get to an agreement, we want to make sure that it's not just a few people voting on the union contract, right? That a super majority also are voting on whether they want to ratify this contract. And if it's the first time you're building a union, you're often also deciding like, is this worth it for me? I'm going to decide if I want to pay dues to our worker organization And is this contract what I feel is what we're worth, right? And so this is, again, a reminder of like, this is not, this is not being out imposed by somebody else. This is workers' vote, right? And we want to make sure as many workers vote in our contract ratification as possible. So that's the,
If you say the majority vote should go for anytime our members are voting, we should.
I absolutely, right? Like, I think we want to try and reach super majority vote on anything that we're engaging with. Right?
That right there needs to be something that we need to educate members a lot on, for the mere fact that people still have that hard, why do I have to pay the union so much? Why do I have to pay, that's something that when we go through all of this, we need to have, because a lot of people, it's the stigma of why do I have to keep getting this? Why do, and if you say the first word, Janice versus that came through, that hit a lot of public sector because they have to pay people who aren't members. Now, how is that going to affect how we deal with this?
So the Janus versus AFSCME meant that not only do people, can people not be members of their union if they're in the public sector and now not pay any of the cost of representation, but the union still has to provide all of that representation, right? So our government would never tell, for example, Netflix that they had to provide streaming services to somebody who wasn't paying for those streaming services, right? This was an intentional attempt to gut our unions by, setting it up so that people feel like, oh, I should be able to get this without contributing, without taking collective action. And it's not an accident that people are talking about blues, right? The Freedom Foundation, which is funded by big corporations, sends people things on Valentine's Day, on Christmas. Give yourself a Christmas present, right? Drop your union. And they want us to think about our union system, right? Which is so important that when we're organizing, we're talking about this in terms of collective power and democracy. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there, but I just want to do a quick plug at the end. I mentioned I'm from the State Federation of Unions. We have a website that we launched a while back, and this is called unionizedcalifornia.org. So any worker anywhere around the state can go to this website and quickly enter in some basic info and say, I want to organize at work, right? So if you think you might want to organize, you're not sure where to start, you can fill out a few simple questions. Then me or somebody from my team will call you and say, okay, let's talk about it. Tell me a little bit more, what's going on. We'll try and connect them with a union organizer for a union in their industry in their part of the state, right? And then that organizer is going to talk to them about all this stuff that we talked about today, right? And help say, okay, here's the first step, right? And let's figure out paso por paso, how step by step, how you can form a union with your coworkers, no matter where you work. We get we got a lead from a nursery, plant nursery in Hillbrook, which is near San Diego. So these were farm workers. And I talked to the workers for a while, and the workers eventually, I connected with the United Farm Workers. They organized a union within actually just a couple months because there's a strong new law for farm workers to organize, and they are now in negotiations with their employer. Workers at a movie theater. We connected with a union called IATSE, or Theatrical and Stage Employees. They organized the union, and they're now in negotiations with their employer. So we got some good, and some nonprofits. So we got some good examples. You have a question? Yeah, okay. Any questions before we wrap? Okay, I want to thank everybody so much for the participation and sharing and learning in the room today. Really appreciated being here with you guys today. Give yourselves a big round of applause. And thank you, Dylan, for inviting me.
Let's give it up for Chloe for all.